What if the version of you that feels too loud, too much, too bold is actually the key to getting everything you want? Welcome to this new episode of Voice Notes from Samio. In today's episode, I wanted to talk about how playing it small and feeling it too much can actually be holding you back, and how to step into that version of you who isn't afraid to take up space. So I want to start by talking about how the idea of being too much is oftentimes a mirror and not a flaw. The label often reflects other people's limits and not your excess. Now, there's two parts of this. I often talk about how it's human nature to want to feel safe. And that's why it can be really hard for us to step outside of our comfort zone, because oftentimes represents change. It can feel scary and ultimately lead us to feeling really unsafe. And the same thing can go for other people. Not everybody, but some people really do not want to see you change. And whether they're aware of it or not, it's because oftentimes they can see that change as being unsafe. And if people have got used to you showing up in a particular way, it can feel really unsafe and scary for them when you start to change or step into your power or act a little bit more bold, dress a little bit differently, because it's not what they're used to seeing. And sometimes it can even make them question some of their own choices and own decisions and the way that they ultimately have been showing up. On the other side of things, it can often be a form of projection. Some people will project their own limitations onto you. And so it can be kind of jarring for some people if you're stepping into something that they maybe don't have the confidence to do, or maybe they feel insecure about. A really simple example is if you've ever been told an outfit you're wearing is too much. And it's not that this always comes from a place of projection, but sometimes there can be an underlying element of, I would not feel comfortable wearing that, so why should you be bold enough to feel comfortable wearing that? And so in those scenarios where you're being told you're too much, it can often more so be that a mirror is being held up to that person, and whether they're consciously aware of it or not, it can actually be that they are seeing something in you and the things that you do or the way that you show up that reflects to them an area that they have maybe not fully accepted in themselves or don't feel confident in themselves, or the fact that you're doing something that they don't feel brave enough to do. And so this is when I think it's really important that we reclaim these phrases such as too much, too emotional, too driven, the list goes on, and instead see them as a superpower. Because ultimately, if it's something that you are able to step into and do and be, and other people are not, that is something within you that's actually quite powerful. Because especially if someone else is seeing that and not realizing how you have, let's say, the sheer audacity to step into that or be that particular way, it shows that there's a part in them that feels like they could never. Like, how is this person being so bold? And like I say, sometimes it can come back to that projection or that fear of you changing and being different to them. Because another point that's important to add, just as much as you want to stay in your comfort zone, so does the next person. And so that when they see you stepping out of that comfort zone and maybe taking bold action or showing up in a particular way, that can then sound alarm bells to them that it's maybe time for them to do the same. And not everybody is ready to take those steps or make those changes or show up in that particular way. And so it can be quite uncomfortable and very confronting. So they're going to do everything in their power to keep you small, to keep you where you are, because they don't want to have to make any changes themselves. And they sure as heck do not want you to show them up or make them feel like they have to address any of their own issues. And especially if people are used to you being a particular way, I think sometimes when you've maybe shrunk yourself or dimmed your light for such a long time, people just see that as the default you. And so that's why often people can throw around the term as, oh, you've changed, you're different. And that may be the case, which I don't think there's a problem with that. We all should be changing and growing and evolving. But on top of that, I think it can also just be that you've actually just become more yourself. And so when you have started to become more comfortable to show up in a certain way, to do certain things, and then people are saying that you're too much, it's kind of like, well, actually, this is the real me, and I'm just now feeling confident enough to show up as this person. So you're going to have to either like it or get out of the way. So when you do start to step into this version of yourself, one thing that is quite funny is you will notice that so many of the people that maybe doubted you or deemed you as too much will quickly change their tune when they see that this begins to work in your favor or pay off. And often those same people that were once saying you were too much or you were too ambitious or too adventurous or whatever it is, you'll quickly see their language reframe when they notice that it's paid off for you. And then they'll say, oh, wow, you're so brave, or, oh, wasn't that great that you've done that? And some of those same people will even start coming to you for advice, which is often an interesting one. And I think if you view this too much version of yourself as stepping into your power, you'll actually see how over time it can serve as inspiration for those around you. Because like I say, going back to the discomfort thing, at first it's going to feel uncomfortable, both for yourself and for other people, especially if you have dimmed yourself down for quite some time. But the more you do it, the people that are on board with it, you will soon see that they might even follow suit and they might even be inspired by some of the actions you're taking. Now, don't get me wrong, it is likely you're going to lose people along the way because not everybody's going to like it. Like what I said before, any sign of change or stepping into this bolder version of yourself, it can be really scary for some people. And like I say, it's completely natural and not everybody is willing or ready to take the same steps at the same time, nor does everybody have to take the same steps. Some people could just be on a very different path and not like the direction you're heading. And so that could sometimes cause a little bit of conflict. And like I say, some people aren't going to want to have that mirror held up to them. And so with that, not everybody can handle seeing you step into that version of yourself. But as for the people that do stick around, you'll likely see that you can then sort of guide the way in many ways. And like I say, you can actually in turn end up being quite inspiring for other people in your life. And then it's great because then they start to step into their boldness or areas where in the past they've maybe felt too much. And then it can even become quite cyclical because then you're even becoming inspired by and learning from each other as you go. Now, another thing with playing it small, shrinking yourself doesn't make you safe. It makes you invisible. Now, if you're struggling with low self-esteem, you might be thinking, well, I want to be invisible. I don't want anybody to notice me or think of me as too much or whatever it is. But I would argue that's only because you've shrunk yourself for so long that you forgot who you really are. And actually that version of you who is too much, too bold, too loud, too colorful, too excitable, whatever it may be, is your truest self. And you've gone so far from yourself that of course it doesn't feel good. And so of course you don't want that version of yourself to be seen. Or if you've been around people for a long time who constantly tell you you're too much, you're too this, you're too that, you're going to start to believe it. And actually, it only disconnects you further from those who would truly appreciate that version of you, that version that's apparently too bold or too much. And when you perpetually dim your light, it affects so many areas of your life, from relationships to opportunities to impact. I think even in the opportunity sense, we've likely all been in scenarios or in a space where we maybe have felt like we can't show up like our truest self, or we've dimmed our light for whatever reason. And it's in those moments that we maybe only know in hindsight that we could have missed potential opportunities if there would have been a person there that we could have connected with who would have given us the job that we wanted or connected us with the right person for the right opportunity, and so on and so forth. And on the other hand, you might have had times where you have stepped into your boldness and you have been that person who's a little bit too much and it's worked in your favor. And I think with relationships, it's another good one because we can often get into the habit of really guarding ourselves and feeling a little bit too much, so we hold back. I understand with dating, and when you meet someone early on, you don't want to be maybe too full on because you don't want to scare them off. But at the same time, I feel like we've gotten to this age of being so cool and nonchalant that no one can really tell what people's true emotions are, or it's really, really hard to. And so it obviously takes a level of vulnerability, but showing up as how you really are is what's going to enable you to have those deeper connections. More recently for me, for example, one of my newer friends, I remember we connected on a deeper level quite early on. And there was one time we were having a conversation and things got deep, let's just put it that way. And this friend afterwards was, I think it was like a, like a fear of oversharing when you spoke quite personally, shall we say. And I remember them saying, "Oh, sorry, I'm being too much. I'm being too intense." And I was like, "No, you are not." That showed to me the way that they were speaking and their energy, the way they went round the houses with the conversation. I was like, you are my type of person. We just really got each other and it allowed us to connect. And I really appreciated the vulnerability. And so moments like that can actually allow you to connect. And obviously, it's not always going to work. It's not always going to pay off in your favor, because there are going to be people who are like, oh, no, you are a bit too loud. Oh, no, you do talk a bit too much, or whatever it is. But in hiding those parts of ourselves, we're just doing ourselves a disservice, because we're stopping ourselves from connecting to the people that will truly get it. And I've mentioned this before as well. Not everybody's going to like us and not everybody's going to get us, but the ones that do, do. And by holding back these parts of ourselves, we're just blocking ourselves off from having those deep connections. So I think that's a really big one. And so allowing ourselves to step into that too much version of ourselves to have those connections can be really, really powerful. And the same when it comes to opportunities. If you've been maybe deemed as too ambitious, too bold, those I would see as superpowers. I'm someone who struggles to, I mean, the word in itself makes me go, ugh, maybe I should work on this, but network. But I see some people and they are so good at it. They can be so good at working a room, at just getting opportunities. Don't get me wrong, I can speak to people, I can make friends, but when it comes to like that networking, like more business side, that is an area I struggle. So when I see people who are like that, who are very good at connecting and networking, I see that as a superpower, because that's something that doesn't come natural to me. And so, like I said earlier, when people are telling you you're too much in an area, I would question it, and it might be something that they're actually lacking in themselves. And so when we are dimming our light and holding ourselves back because we don't want to be deemed as too much in certain scenarios, we can actually be blocking ourselves off from so many opportunities. And I think about this a lot with like just self-promoting as a creative. And in fact, I'm going to do it right now. If you were enjoying this episode, please give it a like. And if you are listening, please leave a 5-star rating and review, because it helps more than you would know, and subscribe, all that good stuff. There we go. I'm practicing what I preach. Sometimes I hold back from doing that because I'm like, oh, I don't want to be too much. But actually, I don't mind when other people do that. And it's a good reminder and I actually engage. So just an example there. But another one is impact, that I think we underestimate how much of an impact it can make, whether we do step into our boldness and into our light or whether we don't. Think of some of the greatest artists, whether it's anything from a painter to a musician. Often the great innovators and the people that have made the biggest impact are the ones that are maybe at times being a little bit too much. Just think, if those people would have listened to people telling them that whatever they're doing is too much, or what society was constantly telling them was too much, do you think that they would have made the same amount of impact that they have made? And even more on an intimate level, just think of how you showing up in a particular way or not showing up in a particular way affects those in your immediate environment. I instantly think of parents. If you have children and you are dimming your light for whatever reason, or playing it small, or feeling like, oh no, I can't be bold, I can't be too much, I must stay small, I must dim my light. In that example, what is that teaching them? And even if you don't have children, like I say, the knock-on effect it can have for those around you. Not everybody will like it and some people will find it scary. But for those who get on board with it and actually can take something from it, it can be so, so powerful and you can create such a big impact. I mean, people create whole movements by stepping into that too muchness. So I think next time you are playing it small, really have a little think about that and think about the fact that you're not only doing yourself a disservice, but you could be doing so many other people a disservice too, that maybe could also benefit from what you have to share, do, even how you can bring joy to people by the outfits you wear. I don't know. The list is endless. I really do think that boldness often signals belief. And in particular, with being too much, it often just means being unapologetically clear. And some people really do not like this. I think, especially if it comes from a woman, but even if it's from a guy or whoever, people can sometimes have a little bit of an adverse reaction. And this is an area in particular that I have really worked on for myself, because I have been stepping into my unapologetic era. I used to think I wasn't so unapologetic, but then the amount of times I would find myself saying sorry or over apologizing or over explaining. And actually, the more I've just strengthened my self belief, the relationship with myself, and really got clear on what I want and set certain boundaries in place, I'm kind of like, I said what I said, and I'm going to be how I'm going to be. I'm always going to be a friendly person. I'm not going to be rude to anyone, but I just know now how to better be clear and state what I do and do not want. And actually, people respect and respond to certainty a heck of a lot better, even if they don't like it. It's like if you have a manager at work. If you have a manager that is a little bit wishy-washy, is really unsure, who's very unclear, that's probably going to stress you out more than if you have a manager that knows what they want and is clear with their directions. I'm not talking about a manager who's a megalomaniac or a dick. I'm just talking about someone who is clear and concise and knows what they want. And I think for a lot of us in many situations, we can have a little bit of a visceral response to the idea of being too much or being too bold. And so we can shy away from it. And I think it comes back to that idea of people pleasing, which I talk about a lot, but I think it's so ingrained in our society. Especially, I feel like in the UK, it's really in our culture, and we are a very polite society. You know, we might not always say what we think, which has its pros and cons for sure. But I think when you get into the habit of people pleasing, it can really start to disconnect you from your own wants and needs, because you're ultimately trying to fulfill the wants and needs of everybody else's to hopefully satisfy them or be pleasing. And I think with all of this, it can be really scary to be deemed as too much in any scenario for fear of being rejected, whether it's from friends, family, society, our extended social groups, and so forth. And so it goes back to us wanting to stay safe and wanting to stay in that comfort zone. And if we have molded ourselves through people pleasing to be a certain way, to be palatable, to be potentially quote unquote liked, and I use air quotation marks there because not everyone's going to like you. If we've got into the habit of being like this, it can be really hard to reconnect to ourselves and our boldness. And this is when we need to dim the noise and start listening to ourselves again and really thinking about what we desire in life in all different areas, because our desire isn't random, it is a roadmap. And usually if we desire something, a particular goal, a way we want to live our life, an adventure we want to go on, somewhere we want to live, so on and so forth, it's oftentimes because there is a possibility that that could be a reality. And going back to being in those cycles where you're constantly told you are too much, it can really dim that connection and that belief in ourselves. And so then we start to tell ourselves, that desire is silly. I can't do that. Oh, I'm too much for that. And so we play it safe and we play it small. And so over time, that desire or that dream becomes too big. But actually, when you start to tap into it and when you honor it, you will find that the right resources and the allies appear. And I'm not even talking woo-woo stuff here. See it as woo-woo or spiritual if you want. But even in the most normal sense, it goes back to how when we show up as that too much version of ourselves, as that bold version of ourselves, we are then able to connect with the people that get it, make those relationships, create those opportunities and connections. And through that, that's when everything can become aligned. Sure, there might be a little bit of magic in the air around it that works its way into there, but it is interesting to see when you do allow yourself to start showing up as that person, how little synchronicities can happen and how we can actually be closer to our desires and our dreams than we think. But we just have to take the action and step into that boldness and that too muchness. And things do start to align quicker than you would realize. It starts with leaning in. And what I mean by leaning in is, say, for example, You know that the version of you that you desire to be, the way you want to show up in this world, is full goth. I'm talking head to toe black, maybe some black lipstick, maybe black nails. What else do goths wear? Do goths still exist? I definitely saw a young goth on my TikTok recently. They looked really cool. Anyway, say you want to step into that, but it feels a little bit scary to just go from, dressing like your average Joe to the next day going full goth. It might feel a little bit bold and a little bit too out there. I mean, do it if you feel ready, go for it, whatever floats your boat. I would say baby steps. Maybe you try an all black outfit. Maybe you go for a black lipstick. Maybe you paint your nails black. And over time, you lean into that. That's just the most random example that popped into my head. I don't know why a goth. I've got like a Sims version of a goth in my head, which is probably so outdated. I do apologize. But it could be any example where you lean into it. If you want to start making YouTube videos or a podcast, but you've never recorded anything in your life and put it out on the internet, it might feel like a bit of a leap to be like, right, tomorrow I've started my own channel and I'm putting out videos. If you can do that and you feel confident enough to, great, like go for it. But for most of us, things do take stepping stones. We lean into it. Could it be that you start by creating a TikTok account and posting some videos? Maybe you don't tell anyone at first, you just practice speaking to camera. Maybe you don't even post what you record, you just practice. You might create a whole video, edit it, and just see how it feels. You lean into it and you let your self-belief of that identity catch up. So the more that you do it, the more that you become it. And it will start to be really, really natural. Initially when I started YouTube, for example, it felt pretty cringe. I'm not going to lie. I was like, there is not a chance that I am going to sit and talk on camera for YouTube. And bearing in mind, this was years ago, there was no TikTok and the likes of that. And so it felt quite literally too much for me to sit and talk to camera. I was like, no, which is hilarious because now you can't shut me up. But that's because I fully leaned into it. And so my first video, I didn't even speak. It had music over the top. And then the next video, I was like, oh, I'll do a bit of speaking and so on and so forth. And I leaned into it. And so it's essentially just taking baby steps and vocalizing your truth and allowing yourself to take space and asking without apology. When you know what you want and you know what you desire, you need to go after it and allow yourself to take up space, allow yourself to be too much, because that's ultimately what's going to get you there. And the people who get it will get it, and the people who don't won't, but it's fine, because through it, you really do find your tribe. It's like these episodes, they're not going to be for everyone. If you have made it this far, I appreciate you. And I'm so glad we're having this chat because I do enjoy chatting your ear off. And for someone else, they probably didn't even make it past the first 30 seconds and they might be thinking, oh, this girl is too annoying or too much, or insert whatever label. At the end of the day, you're always going to be too much for someone. You're always going to be too crazy, too bold, too happy, too silly. I don't know. The list goes on. But as long as you are living in your own truth, that is the most important thing. And I think another part is having strategies in place to protect your fire, not dim it. Because at the end of the day, not everybody is going to get you. And sometimes it is inevitable. You can't always avoid the people that are going to find you too much. And so I think having little boundaries with yourself is always great. Not everybody needs to know what you're doing. Not everyone will understand the career path you want to pursue or the country you want to move to. And so whilst I'm not saying that you should hide yourself or have to be secretive about what you do or how you show up in the world, what I would say is if there are people in your life that you can't get away from whatever reason, and they maybe are constantly criticizing or saying you're too much, maybe just limit telling them so much about your plans and what you're doing. Obviously, it depends on the scenario. Sometimes it's easier than other times, but just realizing the people who are supportive and the people who aren't, and the people that light you up and ultimately allow you to live your best life. Remember, the version of you that's too much is the one that gets what they want. I have chatted a lot. No doubt I'll think of more things that I want to add when I'm in the edit, but you know what? We can do this again soon. So if you have liked this episode, please do give it a like. Let me know in the comments below an area of your life where you have maybe felt too much and you're kind of trying to shift that energy and step into this bolder version of you. Or maybe someone has told you you're too much and we want to throw that in the bin. Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear. If you have enjoyed this episode, subscribe and we can do this again soon. I have thoroughly enjoyed chatting your ear off as always, and I will speak to you next time.